Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Keeping It Real on Purpose, and I am your host, Edna White. And today we welcome to Keeping It Real on Purpose. I guess I want to say a magnificent woman that took a ride on the midnight train from Georgia with Lady Dhyana Ziegler, the brilliant mind behind the book that gives voice to a music legend history nearly forgotten. Lady Ziegler brings us closer to the life and legacy of her brother in law, William Guest, a founding member of the icon group Gladys Knight and the Pips. Through personal memories and powerful storytelling, we uncover the roots of a musical family that started in a small Atlanta church and went on to shape the sound of a generation. If you love the rich tapestry of music, history, family, and faith, this is the episode you don't want to miss. And welcome, Lady Dhyana.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
You're so welcome. So tell us how you show up in the world.
Well, let's say, as it relates to the book, I lived the story. My
Hmm.
brother-in-law was in my life since I was 11 years old. As you said, William Franklin Guest. He married my sister, Patricia Ziegler. So since I was 11 years old, I lived this story along with them. And this is a story of coming of age. It's a story of kids who had a dream to sing,
Hmm.
and through the roots of the Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia, they found themselves to be an iconic group that went globally with their iconic strong sound,
Hmm.
their syncopated dance steps, etc. So starting at that time, I was really young. My mother and father always took us to the Apollo Theater. My father was the lead singer of the Morning Doves Gospel Quartet. And
Okay.
my sister and I used to be dancers in the community, the community centers and stuff. That we grew up in New York
Hmm.
City. So we always went to the Apollo. My mother happened to know Bobby Robinson, who became their first manager with Every Beat of My Heart. But if I
Okay.
take it way back before then, Babe Ruh, as I call him, it would be, um, he wouldn't be happy if I didn't talk about his family on the back
Okay.
porch playing music when he was a little boy. He always said that he was probably singing and dancing in the womb because he always heard his mother, and his grandmother was a singer, and his uncle played guitar. In fact, his
Hmm.
grandmother, Mama Tilly, taught him how to sing harmony in the kitchen while she was cooking. And
Right.
well, what a lot of people don't know is the original Pips consisted of five: Gladys Knight, her sister Brenda Knight, Bubba Knight,
Hmm.
my brother-in-law William Guest, and his sister Eleanor Guest. Those were the original Pips, who recorded first. The
Okay.
cousin Edward came later, when Brenda and Eleanor decided they wanted to go back to Atlanta and have children. So,
Hmm.
the story and the reason why the book is named The Midnight Train from Georgia, because they left Georgia. But
Right.
they gave me a hit song that I could have a title to really, really play off of,
Hmm.
which was great. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. So William's journey from church choirs to Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is extraordinary. What do you think
Right.
was the key to the Pips staying powerful over the years?
Well, one of the things, they were together for 37 years.
Hmm.
And I always say that harmony went a lot further than just the blending of voices. They had
Okay.
the harmony of spirit. It
Hmm.
was their faith, their love for family that kept them together. I mean, they did everything. They split everything down. Um,
Okay.
4 ways. They prayed before every performance. And,
Uh-huh.
they weren't, I always call them, I used to tease them like the apple pie group.
Hmm.
They were not, there weren't big scandals or any
Hmm.
of that stuff. Not that everybody was a saint, you
Right.
know, but they really tried to live up to that family tradition. First of all, in Mount Moriah Baptist Church, where they were
Hmm.
brought up, they sang in the youth choir. Their parents sang in the adult choir. So it was just a fluke that they became a group. It was Bubba's 10th birthday party, and Garfield, a friend, came over with one of those little record players that you carried around that nobody
Uh-huh.
would understand now because everything is streaming.
Nope,
So
not
a
at
big
all.
box, right, with a needle and all of that, did not. But Garfield had to go home early, and they were already in the groove, and they started just singing together. And the parents say, wow, these kids sound great. And
Hmm.
then from the youth choir, they started getting invitations around. And that's how they first started singing as a group. Now, when they came to New York with Bobby Robinson, of course, they experienced some, everything was different from them. The Hotel Teresa was very, very high. They were afraid to look out the window. The Apollo was very, very exciting. See, I'm a New Yorker, so I lived
Right.
in a high-rise building, but for them, that was totally, totally different. So they were very,
Right.
very shy. Plus, they got ripped off when
Oh
they
wow.
were young. Bobby Robinson. They had a number one hit record, but they weren't making any money
Oh
because
yeah.
they would say,
I've
well,
heard that
those
story. Yeah.
suits that you have. And
Hmm.
that's the way the business used to be. It's not
Yeah.
like the entertainment industry is now, where you can just take off and put something on stream and all of a sudden you're a multi-millionaire.
Yeah.
It did not work like that back then.
Hmm.
But it
Hmm.
was, Gladys decided to go back to Georgia. She was married to the saxophone player. She decided that
Okay.
she would go back to Georgia for a while, and the guys decided to stay. They recorded on their own as the Pips, Linda and Darling. And
Hmm.
my brother-in-law wrote the song. Linda, he was a very, very talented songwriter.
Okay.
And for those who don't know, because I didn't know until Bubba told the story at the funeral, he put the whoo whoo in Midnight Train.
Oh
And we didn't
wow.
know that, which is major. And Bubba said he told him, if we do this, it would be a hit. And lo and behold, it was. So
Yeah.
then they met Marguerite Mays, who was the ex-wife of Willie Mays, the baseball player, and she
Hmm.
became
Hmm.
their manager.
Oh
So
wow.
she really basically polished up their act.
Okay.
She introduced them to Charlie Atkins. Um, Atkins and Cole, were the tap dancers from back there in the
Oh
40s and
yeah.
so. That's where the
Hmm.
syncopated dance steps came from. She
Hmm.
introduced them to Charlie Atkins, and he took them on. And they talk about how he just tapped on a can and made them dance. They didn't even know exactly what was going on because he was just getting them used to the rhythm. And as a result, Marguerite Mays really worked with them, made them a class act, took them out of Harlem, put them on the island, and they stayed with her for a
Hmm.
while until they were discovered by Barry Gordy, who
Wow.
wanted them then to come to Motown Records. Now,
Hmm.
ironically, they went to Motown, but Charlie Atkins came too. So Charlie Atkins became the one to not only teach the Pips, but all of the other male, the Temps, Four
Wow.
Tops, etc., dancing.
Yeah.
That's why you see that there was a very specific, besides the sound, there was the class, because
Yeah.
even the women had to go to like a charm school. So,
Hmm.
that whole iconic era Motown was designed for, fashion, fun, great music, but to not only turn out artists, but grand performers and great performers.
Wow,
So, of
that's
course,
great.
through Motown, I heard it through the grapevine, etc. That
Hmm.
became the hit record. Now, as I said, they made all the decisions together because Gladys didn't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily want to go to Motown because she
Gotcha.
thought that she would be competing with Diana Ross, Martha and the Vandellas, the Marvelettes,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
the female group. So she was concerned about that, which eventually, after so much time, they left Motown because they
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be, and they had some of the same issues with Barry Gordy. They wanted a different contract and more money, and he wasn't coming through with that. So they ended up
Right.
going to Buddha Records, and Buddha gave them what they wanted.
Gotcha.
100% concentration on them as a group. And
Gotcha.
that's when you have the midnight train from Georgia, the midnight train to Georgia. I keep saying from.
Yeah.
That's the book,
Mm-hmm.
folks. Midnight Train to
Yes.
Georgia is a film. And
Yes.
that became, besides that song, you just had, where peaceful waters flow, etc. The Imagination
Right.
album that John Weatherby, the famous songwriter, helped to,
Mm-hmm.
write many of those songs. And so they went to another level with
Mm-hmm.
Buddha because that's when the Grammys started coming, the American Music Awards started coming, and the rest is history. They started doing movie tracks. They traveled all
Gotcha.
over the world, and it was just a wonderful experience and a great ride for 37 years. And of course, they were
Yeah.
inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in
Mm-hmm.
1996.
Yeah. In telling this story, were there any surprising discoveries or emotional moments that changed the way you saw William or the legacy of the Pips?
Again, I was there.
Mm-hmm.
So there were no surprises, for
Okay. Okay.
11 years old. And all of the things, like all of them thought that I was like their little sister. In fact, he called me little Di.
Mm-hmm.
Edward thought he was my father. So in the middle, I mean, so we were all just one family. My mother was
Okay.
Mama Ziegler, the Mama Knight, Mama
Mm-hmm.
Guest. So
Mm-hmm.
um some of what surprised me maybe a little bit more is some of the things that, because again, said he wasn't a saint because he had, some outside children. So
Mm-hmm.
that was more surprising watching my sister deal with that as
Gotcha.
opposed to, because not saying that that was a way of life, but a lot of entertainers,
Mm-hmm.
that was
Yeah.
their thing. Not even then, but even now,
Now, yeah, even now,
that
yeah.
you're out there, you're a big star, people are putting everything on, on your feet,
Mm-hmm.
women are chasing you all over
Yeah.
the place. That's what the
Temptations everywhere. Temptations
temptations
everywhere.
everywhere. But one of the things, to his death, they stayed together. He lived upstairs, but
Uh-huh.
they were, besides being married and after they divorced, they were friends. We were
Right.
family. And
Mm.
we maintained that family. I learned a lot growing up,
Mm.
and sort of that atmosphere is a little bit different growing up in Harlem and New York City than growing
Yeah.
up in, the South. So
Mm-hmm.
but what I loved about it is how they gathered as a family. We gathered as a family too, but
Mm-hmm.
our 22 cousins, it was mostly on holidays. They were together all the time and
Mm.
still are. I mean,
Yeah.
the guest family is solid. We don't have, I'm the last Ziegler, so we don't have as many Zieglers and that big
Okay.
family. I
Okay.
love the nurturing and the caring for not only each other, but for the elderly, all the things that you would want your child or someone in your family to be, is the way they grew up and
Yeah.
caring. I mean,
Yeah.
besides being a big personality, he was also extremely funny. So, he kept us laughing all the time. And
Okay.
the various stories on the road, I mean, and some of them weren't true, but they were just so funny. You just believe,
Yeah.
like you pick up somebody with no hands, but they open the door,
Yeah.
but again, that was part of the backstage culture, the entertainment
Yeah.
culture. It was full of
Yeah.
life, full of love, and full of laughter.
That's great. Can you share a moment or a memory of William that truly captures who he was off stage as a person?
Well, he was very, very protective of
Okay.
his family. He was, and
Hmm.
he was also scared of cats. He probably wouldn't want me to say, but he was that kind of, fear. Like he had little things. I mean, and now he was in a car accident
Uh-huh.
when they were very young as a group, and it messed up his legs. He almost died.
Right.
So one of the things he made sure, and he told us this forever, not to ever go to sleep in a car,
Right.
because of that accident. He was so
Hmm.
protective. He would watch us on the escalators. You would have thought, I mean, I was real grown, but you would have thought I was still 5 years old, the way that
Hmm.
he was taking care of his family. He was
Yeah.
loving and very funny. And I guess my most fond memories is really us as a family listening to his stories. I could remember my mother used to say, "Now stop lying, William. I know that's not true." Because he told so many funny stories, but that was the backstage culture that time. I mean,
Hmm.
we would
Hmm.
be backstage with many of the groups, and it was like, who can tell the most lies or get the biggest laughs, because that was part of the fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
They rode those buses together before, they weren't jet setting. Back in the day, they had to ride those buses and those old
Yeah.
cars and, go to those back alley hotels, etc.
Yeah.
But, just being a caring, loving family, and the way that he cared for his family, and the way that he was protective,
Hmm.
to the last days. I remember
Yeah.
us all just gathering in the hospital room. We were still laughing, and
Hmm.
stuff, and still joking, and just making sure that we stay together. That was the
Right.
message. You all take care of each other and stay
Yeah.
together. And
That's
I
beautiful.
watched my sister and her kids and stuff. Well, they're
Mhm.
grown. They're real grown now, but they do all of these things together, and they keep passing that tradition down. I
Right.
always say, like the Guest family, they take care of each other no
Yeah.
matter what.
That's good. That's great. The book touches on both music and the business. What lessons can today's artists learn from the Pips experience?
Well, I think that the people in entertainment, they have a lot more at their advantage now. They can more or
Okay.
less control their own
Hmm.
destiny, which they could
Right.
not in the past. But I would still say, read that contract
Yeah.
really, because some people are still being ripped off.
Hmm.
I would
Hmm.
say, because I had a number one song in 1975, "Time Moves On" by Strut, and
Hmm.
some of those back door where your records are being taken out of the back door, I
Right.
witnessed. And so
Right.
make
Okay.
sure that you try, and yet you try to understand this business, but also that you have a good lawyer besides,
Yeah.
because everything is not, streaming. Even trying
Right.
to make sure you understand what those royalties are, because they're a whole
Yeah.
lot different now. It was very
Right.
simple back in the day. You had BMI and you had
Mhm.
ASCAP, and they
Yep.
were paying the royalties. Now you got things coming from all different places, and
Yeah.
people
Different
independently
directions.
also
Hmm.
doing their own thing. So
Right. Right.
be careful and try to maintain ownership, as much ownership as you possibly can,
Right.
on your product.
Right.
One thing that was very important in this book, I own the copyright. No
Right.
publisher does. I
Right.
own it, because I would hope that it will go to a film or a documentary or something. I don't want to have
Hmm.
to negotiate, with all of those, individuals out there that may not
Yeah.
be in your favor.
Right.
Everything that sounds good is not.
Not good. Yeah. Yeah. How do you hope Midnight Train from Georgia will shape the way we remember not just William Guest, but the full legacy of the Pips and their contribution to American music?
Well, they are. I was talking to someone who said to me, wow, they were such a standout, even in Motown, with all
Yeah.
of those stars.
Hmm.
Their sound, Gladys' voice. I mean, they all were lead singers.
Hmm.
Gladys became the lead singer because they had two versions of Every Beat of My Heart, because one person put one out illegally, getting back
Hmm.
to controlling your music. And to distinguish between the two, they made Gladys the lead singer of the group and called it Gladys Knight and the Pips to distinguish
Okay.
between the two. So,
Hmm.
them as a group to just remember the sound. I think that the harmony, because the harmony
Hmm.
was as melodic as the
Right.
lead voice.
Right.
Everybody can sing with the background. So
Right.
that sound was very, very different. It's not often that you can have a background that goes to a
Hmm.
melody. The Pip
Right.
sound was that. Gladys would do her part, they would do their part, but everybody knew the parts and when to come on and sing, just like the woo woo. Uh,
Right.
so their mark on music, I mean, it's still being played today. I was at the
Hmm.
airport a week ago flying
Uh-huh.
out, to Vegas to do a presentation, and I started listening to some music, and I said, that saved the overtime for me. And they were playing them in the airport in
Hmm.
Tallahassee, Florida.
Yeah.
So even I would expect that in New York, but I didn't expect that in Tallahassee. So
Yeah.
their music and their legacy lives on. As I said, they were a class act, very
Hmm.
polished. Their
Yeah.
music was dynamic and it is lasting for decades.
Yeah.
So I would hope that people will remember them for the dynamic group that they are, because they are indeed iconic.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. If listeners take one message away from Midnight Train from Georgia and William's story, what do you hope it to be?
Well, first of all, I hope they get on board and understand and understand that this life and legacy is one that you can really, take your kids on the path to learn,
Hmm.
to learn about family, to learn about love, to learn about harmony, to learn how people can come together for sustainability. We have so many families and people just at odds and stuff. They worked on that harmony in life as much
Yes.
as they worked on that harmony in music. And
Right.
and that is the message. Try to harmonize with life. Try to blend, because harmony is about blending voices. If
Yeah.
we just think about the harmony in life, even as it relates to race
Yeah.
and culture and all of these
Hmm.
things, it's a blending. And, that
Hmm.
is what the world is about. So, what they did and the legacy they leave behind is indeed a legacy of harmony, faith, love, and music.
Yeah.
And as I said before, harmony is much deeper than the blending of voices. It is the blending of spirit. So, and
That's
that's
good.
how you stay together through that love, family, faith, and that blending of spirit.
That's nice. How can our listeners, our watchers, obtain your book, their own copy?
Well, okay, I think you have a copy there.
Yes.
It's on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Nobles. If it's at a
Okay.
store that you can't find, tell them to get it.
Yeah.
Midnight Train from Georgia. It's a fun
Yes.
book.
It
So,
is.
and I hope you enjoy it.
Yes, absolutely. What an incredible journey through music, memory, and legacy. Lady Diana Ziegler, thank you for sharing your heart, and your story of William Guest with us. Midnight Train from Georgia isn't just a
Thank you.
book. It's a tribute to family, faith, and the soulful spirit that shaped your generation. To our listeners, if today's episode moved you, go grab a book and share this conversation. Let's keep these stories alive and celebrate the legends that paved the way. Until next time, keep it real, keep it purposeful, and keep the music playing. Bye for now.
Thank you.